Hey, and welcome to Eat Out at Home, the podcast. This is the place for those who love cooking and creating connections through food. I'm your host, Chef Evelyn, and on this podcast, I share with you my favorite tips and tricks for enjoying life one bite at a time. If you're ready for today's episode, sit back, relax, grab a snack, and let's dive in. Hey, and welcome back to Eat Out at Home, the podcast. And today, I want to talk about how cooking at home preserves culture. And this one is something that is really inspired by every time the holidays rolls around, particularly as an African American. There's so many jokes and think pieces and pieces of content and reels and memes and all of this about how we're losing the recipes and how we are the adults now. And granted, when I'm recording this is springtime, like the weather is getting warm and all that kind of stuff. But it came to my mind the other day, and I just can't help but chuckle. But then underneath that chuckle is a little like sigh of sadness, because I thought about it. I was like, but we are losing recipes, and not just literal recipes, but recipes around culture and connection and tradition. And I was having a conversation with a friend a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about how her mother used to do these giant Sunday dinners, and she was just like, with the way my life is set up, as much as I want to recreate that experience for my children, she was like, I just do not have the capacity to do it. She was like, I'm usually exhausted, I'm tired. And I told her, I said, but you do Saturday morning, like breakfast with your family, your husband and your children, right? And I was like, it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but that tradition of having some sort of core memory around a meal and around cooking at home is in place. And so I wanted to spend this episode kind of chatting about how when we choose convenience over cooking at home, whether we're choosing fast food, whether we're choosing delivery, whether we're choosing prepackaged meals, again, there's nothing wrong with those things at all by themselves. There's nothing wrong with leveraging those things from time to time. But as the standard and as the day-to-day practice, it comes at the cost of preserving culture. And I don't care what your culture is. You could be Jamaican, Haitian, Cantonese. You could be Korean. You could be Japanese, Chinese. You could be Indian, Egyptian. You could be Senegalese. You could be Brazilian, right? You could be Puerto Rican. You can be from the Dominican Republic. You can be a New Orleans resident, right? You could be from, you could be Gullah Geechee. It doesn't really matter. A large part of your culture is in the food, and not necessarily always food that you can go out to eat. Yes, we probably could go to any major city in the world or in the U.S. and find cuisines from all of these fantastic cultures, right? Whether you want Lebanese food or Persian food or whatever the case may be. However, there's something about it being in the family. Like, think about so many cultures, and they talk about their grandmothers or their nonas or whoever that kind of, made these recipes. And yeah, they can get something similar when they order it out or go out to eat or whatever, but it's not quite the same. Or the tradition of sitting around, and whether it's picking greens or forming wontons or making tamales or empanadas or cooking suya and jollof rice, or right, like making apple cider donuts in the fall, whatever your culture is, it is preserved by cooking at home. It is passed on by cooking at home. There is a story, or I think it is is kind of like a is the word I'm looking for, fable here, or like it's not a I was about to say nursery rhyme. It is so not a nursery rhyme, but a old wives' tale. That's what I was looking for, folklore, if you will, about a woman who was making a ham for the holidays, and how she always cut off the butt end of the ham. And so year after year, she, when the holidays came around, she would get a ham and she would cut the butt end off, right? And one day her husband asked her, he was like, why do you always cut off the butt end of your ham? And she said, because that's what my mother did, right? And she was like, so you have to cut off the butt end of the ham. And so I think either him or her one day decided to ask the mother, like, hey, why do you cut off the butt end of the ham when you cook it? And the mother said, oh, because of the size of pot that I had, the ham wouldn't fit, right? But my point is with that story, and I probably butchered it, so if I did, please forgive me, but you get the gist, you get the point. But the point of that story is, even down to those little unspoken rules about how you do things, why you do things, the conversations that are had, the stories that are told, the relationships that are deepened during that time, the customs on why do we serve this? What's the history behind this? A lot of that is not necessarily written in a text somewhere. It is passed down in the kitchen. The kitchen is the classroom for culture. It just is. And that is universal across the globe, actually. It's not, it's not monopolized by one particular culture that says, oh, we pass our culture down through the classroom of the kitchen. Nope. Every single culture that you can think of, they have dishes that are specific to their culture. They have cooking techniques that are specific to that culture. They have flavor profiles that are specific to that culture. They have spices and herbs and ingredients that are specific to that culture. They have traditions around food that are specific to that culture. Like, I never will forget, I was working for a company, and they used to kind of send like their high-end executives to different countries every year to kind of learn about the cuisine and then come back and, bring back specialty products and all that kind of stuff. And I remember one year they had sent the executive team to Italy to just really immerse themselves and not to learn more about authentic Italian cuisine and not necessarily American Italian cuisine. And one of the things that they noted outside of just like, the ingredients and the freshness of all of that was how in this small town that they were in, that once dinner time hit, everything else closed. And that dinner was an event, and that dinner was something that lasted for hours, right? 3, 4, 5 hours, well into the night. And it was this slow progression of food. Well, that's not necessarily something that you're going to learn in a recipe book all the time, or a recipe that you found on Pinterest or on social media, right? That's something about the culture, that is the nature of how they commune and dine together, right? And, you learn about class and different social and economic classes over history, right? The evolution of food through a culture, what things were indigenous to these cultures, what things came through world exploration and trading, what things came through colonization. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not excited about that, but it is what it is, right? And you learn history, and you keep history when you cook at home. So this is more than just, okay, I'm trying to save some money. This is more than just, I'm trying to improve my eating habits. Those are great. And I've also talked at length about how cooking is about the catalyst for creativity, and how cooking at home is like the basis for community care. But in this case, the kitchen is a classroom for preserving culture. And one of the best ways to learn about another culture is through dining with them, communing with them, and not just in a restaurant. You learn about, what is chopstick etiquette, and why is it that way? Why are some cultures just eating with their fingers and a pile of some kind of starchy mass or a specialty bread? Why are some cultures eating on the floor? Why do some cultures have you eat in this progression, right? Why is this a common ingredient or a sauce or a side or a garnishment, right? You learn so many things about culture, but then let me tell you, it just really blows your mind, because you also get introduced to so many different things. And so it's not a linear thing. It's not like, well, if you need more community, then cooking at home is just going to give you community. And it's not just, if you feel like you're a creative block, if you cook at home, you're just going to be more creative. And it's not that if you cook at home, you're probably going to be consuming less calories and you're probably going to be saving money and all this kind of stuff, whatever. you're also going to be preserving culture. You're also going to be doing community care. It is this full 360 ball of benefits to each one of us that sometimes we trade off in the name of convenience. And I say this all the time. I have no judgment about going through a drive-through or convenience foods or prepackaged foods as they are needed. But for me specifically, I want 80 to 90% of my food to be home cooked. I want that to be the default setting. I want that to be the majority of the time, because not only does food cooked at home taste better to me, you get all these other things. Like, think about it. How many times have you been traveling, and even if you've had what you would consider some of the most amazing food, you're like, I just want a home cooked meal, like in my own kitchen with, like, even if you're not as good of a cook as the places you've been, there is something about it that is just like, that's just what I want, right? This is just what I'm in the mood for. And so, yeah, cooking at home preserves the culture. That's why, like, when I think about movies like Soul Food or My Big Fat Greek Wedding or, what was the movie? Crazy Rich Asians and all these different things. Like, food in all of those is very integral to the culture and the preservation of culture. So with that being said, let me know what are some things that are passed down in your family, in your culture, or that you want to preserve by cooking at home. And have you thought about how important this is, that, yeah, we're losing recipes because we're choosing convenience, and we're losing culture because we're choosing convenience. And again, not a judgment, but I want us to be consciously aware that when we make choices, we know what we are trading off in the moment. So with that being said, let me know what kind of cultures and what kind of family traditions and cultures are being passed down in your kitchen, or that you would like to. And I look forward to speaking with you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you're ready to start cooking at home consistently, make sure you join the Eat Out at Home Challenge. Visit chefevelyn.com/challenge for all of the details. If you're curious about what I'm cooking in between episodes, make sure to give me a follow on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook for some delicious behind the scenes. And if you enjoyed this episode, please head on over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify to leave us a review. Remember, eating out at home allows you to cook better, eat healthier, save money, and create community. And most importantly, cooking at home is the ultimate form of self-care. I'll see you in the next episode.